Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to be carrying on with the alphabet tag. We're now on to the letter C. In this series, I take a letter of the alphabet and I will answer 10 questions based around that letter. C is for ... Finish this word with your favourite C-named author. Quite an easy one for me this time. That one's just going to be Angela Carter straight off the bat. She's one of the few authors where I've read all of her books. She's one of the few authors where I've pretty much loved everything that she's ever put out. Her style just really gels with what I like in fiction. It's twisted, it's dark, but also really funny and light and comedic. It's elaborate without being too pretentious. It's witty. I like that she manages to tell realist stories, but with fantastical elements in there as well. Pretty much just sums up everything that I like about fiction. C is for childhood. What is your favourite childhood book or series? Well, I guess there are three main contenders here. We've got The Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter. Chronicles of Narnia, though, I think I was more captured by this BBC adaptation of them, because I don't think I actually read all of the books until I was a little bit older. So I'm not going to say Narnia. Harry Potter I did really enjoy, but I think actually the series that stood out for me most as a kid was the series Unfortunate Events. I have a really vivid memory of being in Whitby on a family camping trip, and we went into a bookshop and I saw a few of the books, and I bought the first one, the sixth one, and maybe the third one. I can't remember which other one I bought, but I bought three of them, and I was just in love with these books straight away. I loved the style of them, the kind of noir, semi-gothic vibe. I liked the narrator's voice, which is just a lot more interesting than the kind of narrators that you usually get in children's books. I loved the characters. I liked the darkness of the books with the child abuse and just the kids kind of having to combat that. I think it was such a good series. Looking back on it, I do think it was a bit repetitive, but still, it's just one of those things that I really remember reading the book for the first time on that camping trip, and I pretty much love the series ever since then. The only thing I will say about it is, unfortunately, it's never been adapted in a way that I like, so hopefully one day it will get a good adaptation, but unfortunately that hasn't happened yet. C is for controversy. What is your favourite controversial book? So I could suggest quite a few books here, but I think I'll go with Lolita. Although I do like other controversial books, I think Lolita is one novel where it makes you kind of forget how controversial it is, whereas other books I think you can just feel that all the way through. What I like about Lolita is that Nabokov is able to tell a story about someone who is, doing something that as a society we think is totally reprehensible, and somehow manages to make you at points empathise with this person. And that's just a real testament to his writing and the character of Humbert Humbert, that he can actually do that. That's not to say it makes you, advocate for that kind of behaviour at all, because it doesn't, and certainly it's satisfying to see Humbert Humbert get his comeuppance at the end, but at the same time, that a writer can do that a writer can make you empathise with a person who is doing something that you deem so immoral. It's just a testament to what a great book that is. It's also just beautifully written, and I have vivid memories of the two times that I've read it, so it just stands out in the mind quite a lot as well. Definitely one worth reading. C is for crime. What is your favourite novel about crime? I guess there could be two possible contenders here for different reasons. One would be the Hannibal Lecter series, and in particular actually it would be Red Dragon rather than Silence of the Lambs. I really enjoyed The Red Dragon when I read it. I don't remember it all that much anymore because it was a few years ago now, but it just really gripped me, the story. And I like how Hannibal as a character, even though he doesn't spend much time in the story, is so kind of mysterious, and he has this gravitational pull towards him. You want him in the story more. Although I've heard that when it actually gets to the books where he is in the story a lot of that mystique goes away, and so it becomes less good. At least that's what some people say. Another book that's a little bit more literary would be Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. I really enjoyed this book the first time that I read it, and the second time that I read it. I think it's a fascinating kind of exploration of crime and what that does to the human mind. Raskolnikov is just a really compelling and engaging character, and so are the secondary characters in the story. It's also quite impressive that Dostoevsky can tell a story about something that's reasonably, quite simple. It's just a murder story, and it's quite a long story, and somehow it doesn't get boring. He's able to really explore all the kind of aspects of committing a crime and what this does to a person, how it breaks them down psychologically with guilt, and how they try and build themselves back up again after they've done this towards the end. And also it's a book that, even though it does really focus on that psychological stuff, it's able to explore side characters as well. It's not just one of those books where the focus is the main character and their drama. It brings in all this other stuff as well, so that you actually get a lot of people going through lots of different things, and so that makes it even better. C is for Canada. Who is your favourite Canadian writer? Again, like with the Australian thing, I haven't read all that many Canadian authors, and so it's going to have to be Margaret Atwood, I think by default. I mean, when I was thinking about Canadian writers that I've read, she was the only one that I could pull up. But that doesn't mean that her work is bad, and I'm not just saying it because she's the only one there. If I hated her, then I'd just say no one, right? So Margaret Atwood it is. I've only read Surfacing by her. I haven't actually read her more famous books, but I will get there eventually. But I really enjoyed Surfacing. I think it's a very psychological story about a woman returning to her hometown after her mother has died and her dad's gone missing, and she's going there to find him. And she's kind of going back to her roots, exploring her family history, her kind of childhood, all those kinds of themes. And getting back to nature is also a big theme, which I tend to like in stories quite a lot. So yeah, a great story, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Atwood's work in the future. C is for Christmas. What is your favourite novel about Christmas? Well, it's a toss-up between The Grinch and A Christmas Carol, and I'm not sure that I could pick between those two. I think I like them for slightly different reasons, although in a way The Grinch is sort of just The Christmas Carol. Similar kind of story, right? You've got someone who hates Christmas, bar humbug, who gets redeemed at the end. So maybe I'll give it to A Christmas Carol for kind of being the originator of that kind of story, or at least maybe there's another one that came out before Christmas Carol that does similar. But yeah, I think these two stories are just great. I love the imagery of A Christmas Carol. The three ghosts, Ebenezer Scrooge, it's just one of those stories that's become kind of ingrained in my head and ingrained in culture. I think it's a fantastic story, and it's always nice to read at Christmas time. And the same is true of The Grinch as well. C is for comedy. Do you prefer comedy or tragedy? I mean, I'd like to cheat a little bit there and say tragicomedy might be my favourite, just because I think that when these two things come together, they can come together in a way that's really beautiful. Because sometimes if you've just got a pure tragedy, it can be a little bit nihilistic and miserable. And sometimes if you've got just a comedy, it can just be a little bit too, happy and go lucky. So combining the two is quite good. But if I had to pick between the two, I think I will say tragedy. One, because when I think about tragic stories like Hamlet or Macbeth, these are stories that have always really gripped me and I've always really loved them. And also one thing that I find with comedy is that, especially with like classic comedies, it just tends not to age as well as tragedy. A lot of jokes are really dependent on context and tastes and humours, and if you don't share the same context when it comes to comedy, it can be really hard to find the stuff amusing. Whereas with tragedy, I feel like they touch on more universal themes. I mean, even though Macbeth is about kings and queens, you still feel that kind of downfall. You still feel something there because, even though it's kings and queens, it's a story about ambition, which we all have. Whereas, I don't know, like Oscar Wilde's plays, the comedy is there, but it revolves a lot around jokes about the society at the time, which isn't really the society that we live in now, and so it can be quite hard for those jokes to land and for you to relate to them. So I think for that reason I'm going to go with tragedy over comedy, which isn't to say that I hate comedy either, but tragedy just seems to have a bit more longevity than comedy does in general. C is for classics. What was the last classic book that you read? Well, that's going to be Leaves of Grass, which I talked about in the last video, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Instead, I'm going to kind of change my answer to the question and say, what classic am I going to read next? And there are two options at the minute on my shelf. I've got Finnegan's Wake, which has been sat there for a long time, because I'm quite intimidated by Finnegan's Wake. I read Ulysses, managed to get through that, and I've been waiting for the right moment to get into Finnegan's Wake, and I'm thinking it could be that one. But also I have In Search of Lost Time by Proust, which is a book that my partner got me for Christmas, or he got me the first two book installments in that series. And so one of these two is probably going to be the one that I pick, and I haven't quite decided yet. But maybe at the minute I think I'm leaning more towards Finnegan's Wake. But maybe that'll change when it comes around to it, because that book is very intimidating. So it might be In Search of Lost Time instead. C is for cookbook. Do you have a favourite cookbook? Well, there are two that come to mind. One would be The Art of French Cooking by Julia Child. Although mainly I like Julia Child for the TV show. I think it's a fantastic cooking show. And what I like about it is she just makes mistakes all the time. So you feel more confident yourself in doing the recipes, because when she makes a mistake, she shows you how you would fix it in real time. Whereas a lot of cooking shows now, it's also professional and sleek, and it just makes you feel inept when you're watching people like, doing all this fancy crap. So I really enjoy Julia Child's cooking show and also her cookbook. It's very rigorous. And some of the recipes in there I've tried and really enjoyed. Another cookbook that I really enjoy is a cookbook called Memories of Gascony. And what's interesting about this cookbook is it basically is half cookbook, half autobiography. And the guy telling the story, I can't remember who the author is. His grandparents were farmers in France, and basically the recipes from the book are kind of inspired by or copied from his grandparents, and it's interspersed with anecdotes and stories, and it goes through the seasons, and so you've got summer recipes, winter recipes, and the kind of things that they were eating on the farm at those times. And it's just a really nice story, kind of half autobiography, and then infusing that with food, which just makes it all the more interesting to kind of have the story behind these recipes as you're going. So that'd be another one that I really enjoy. C is for Castaway. Do you throw out the books that you hate? I'm not too attached to books. If there's a book that's just sat there for a long time and I need space or I'm moving, then I'm inclined to get rid of it. Usually though, what I'll try and do is if there's a book that I have that I didn't enjoy, but I know that someone else might enjoy it, then I'll get in touch with them and say, have you read this? Do you want this? I did that with Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I didn't hate the book, but it was just the sort of book where I knew when I finished it that I wasn't going to read it again. So I asked my cousin, he loves Stephen King, have you read this one? He hadn't, so I sent it off to him. So that's my general policy with books. They'll loiter on the shelf for a while until I can find someone who I think will like it, and then it gets sent off to them. Alright, that's it for this episode of The Tag. Let me know how you would answer the questions today, and let me know what you think of my answers to the questions. I look forward to talking with you in the comments. Take care everyone. Ta-ra.